Yeah, I'm talking to Frank van Hasselt, Chief Executive Officer of an organization or charity, nonprofit organization called Clear Village in London. And I invited Frank for this talk in our House of Vision, because I think Clear Village, when it comes to the subject of rural design, probably made a fantastic contribution in the not too distant past, which went probably more or less unnoticed. And for this reason, because I think it was a watershed event, I wanted to bring it out of the oblivion. I wanted to bring it back to memory. And it is also a common memory because Clear Village held a lab, Clear Village lab meeting, and the lab meeting was a spectacular event, and we're going to show some footage of this event very soon. But we start talking a little bit about the background of this lab. So that lab was stemming from the work of its founder and Thomas Ermacora, who was practically taking a lot of risk to make this event happen. Could you tell us a little bit about Thomas and his reasons to do this experiment? Maybe also give us a little bit of a background so we could understand how all this came about. It came as a big surprise to me, but maybe it was not such a surprise for you.
Well, maybe a little bit less so, because I know Thomas well. So yeah, thank you for having me, Franz, and for the interview, and for reviving the memory of the Clear Village Lab. So as you mentioned, it was very much the creation, very much the baby of our founder and also our current chair, Thomas Ermacora. So Thomas has got a very interesting and colourful background. He's part Danish, he's part Italian, he grew up in Paris. He's done lots and lots of different things in his life. He's run restaurants, he's set up tech companies, he's done all sorts of things. And one of the things he's done too, of course, is Clear Village and everything that Clear Village stands for. Now, to begin with, and that takes us back to the Barcelona lab, it was very much about rural regeneration using design. So in response to your question, Franz, so how did that come about, and what was the kind of origin of that vision? It actually goes back to Thomas's story and Thomas's past. I'm really talking on his behalf here, but he's told me about it, and there are a few elements that I can highlight. So one thing that's important is that as a teenager, he grew up in Paris, but he often went cycling on big cycling tours through France. And together with a couple of friends, he would ride through the south of France, which, as we all know, is extremely beautiful. You pass through lots of idyllic villages, lots of wonderful places that look like just the sort of place one would like to live. But they generally have one problem, which is that they're dying. And this made quite a big impression on him. Then later in life, he ended up in the world of design, architecture, that sort of thing, in urban contexts, so both in Paris and London. Met a lot of designers, worked on some very large projects too, very interesting projects. But again, there was a sense in which he felt that these projects were not doing all they could. Now, one thing that bothered him was that design was concentrating only on cities, that everyone was talking about cities, cities are wonderful, there's going to be more and more cities as human history progresses, and everyone should move to cities, and that's the only place where solutions should be developed and new ideas should be pioneered. So this is something that was communicated to him very clearly, and that you know, he took issue with. The other thing that was also related to that was that there was quite a lot of talk of co-creation in those days already in the world of architecture and design, but that most of the time this didn't actually mean very much. So co-creation or you know, citizen engagement was very much viewed as a one-off thing in the design process, where at some point you would have something finished, or you know, initial plans, you might present them to people, and if all went well, they would just say, yeah, that's okay, we can live with that, just go away and do it. And engagement or co-creation was really viewed as not being any more substantive than that. So I think those three things kind of explain where Clear Village came from and where the lab came from. Because if you take this idea of, okay, they're dying villages and actually they need help, they've got problems, but they've also got wonderful strengths and wonderful assets in many respects. But yeah, they need a bit of help somehow. So that's one aspect. Two, there's a lot of designers, architects doing amazing work, you know, very interesting ideas, lots of skills, but they're not thinking about rural locations. So that's point two. And point three, you can do a lot with this idea of co-creation if you actually take it a little bit more seriously. And Clear Village and the lab, which launched the organization in particular, was really born of these three things. That's how it came about, and that's what I think the lab manifested quite well. It's this idea to do something for remote locations by bringing together designers, architects, and other people with interesting skill sets, and having them go through a process of co-creation.
And that's exactly when I came across the whole thing.
Yeah,
there was an invitation circulated, and Thomas was very generous with helping to bring together people and people who couldn't afford coming and meeting at this beautiful, fantastic place where it all happened. It was the Institute of Advanced Architecture in Barcelona. He even supported their traveling, and so I also could afford being there. And when I turned around, I saw such a crowd of people, such a crowd of extraordinary people that, I mean, bringing them all together was a giant move and a leap of faith. And it was almost impossible, improbable, because at that time, nobody really cared about villages. Yeah. And here you are in the middle of a very creative setup. We're going to see it in a moment. And you are with wonderful people from companies that deal with light or wind energy. You are with eco-village designers. You are with architects. You are with facilitators. You are with cooks, you know, that even care for your needs. And you have the feeling, hey, we are a 3-day village here now, and it gives us also almost the experience of what a creative future is going to be if people in a local circumstance truly have something to work on together. And one thing that I took from Barcelona, and we're going to show it now, is how this village piazza was all the time full of talks and full of enthusiastic presentations and ideas and feelings, you know. So just let's roll that little 5 minutes video to give our viewers a feeling what happened there.
Yeah, well, let's go for it.
In November 2009, the Clear Village Foundation held its first lab event. The lab was a participatory design environment where experts from over 20 professions and countries came together to find solutions to complex community problems.
We're trying to find solutions to sustainable living through participatory design and planning and collaboration and co-creation environments. But we have a focus which is the village scale.
this greater context about how to design a village, we need to not only realize that it's about creating something new, it's also about taking what exists and improving it.
We want to upgrade villages in a participatory way. And our belief is that through co-creation, we can have the expert community and the local community work together.
The sustainability discussion needs a context within which to design. And the village scale is the optimum scale to design for sustainability.
We've spent a lot of energy working on a process and a methodology to encapsulate co-creativity and make it produce something which is a tangible output. This formula is what we call the lab. At the lab, we had quite an extraordinary group of individuals. A lot of people had a design background. We had economists, philosophers, psychologists, anthropologists that have worked with communities before.
I'm an architect, and I just came back from India. I was working on a project of incremental change in slums and work with the community on participatory design and construction processes for the greater good.
You've been divided in 8 groups, and you have 3 locations to work with. You're going to be given a map on the table, and you're going to be given some location information packs. So we hope you come up with some ideas about what one could do in an isolated Mediterranean village, which is the typology that we want to work on.
We begin with general concepts. They move from that general concept of brainstorming into the specifics of workable, designable concepts.
Yeah, we agree that our priorities to have our basic needs met must be there at the bottom.
So really our community are these overlapping and non-overlapping networks of divergent and differing interests.
What's happening is that they're developing design on different levels. So there's a kind of conceptual flowchart they're putting together. Architects, planners are doing some plan form visualization to give you a spatial sense of how these solutions are playing out on the site from the bird's eye perspective. It's an inspiration to people to see that other people are working in the same way and to try to learn from them in a self-challenging way, which is a euphemism for yes, it's very competitive.
We're making a new city centre by densifying the airfield.
We're going to have a farmers market. The concept is the gardens, that it's food production.
We want to have this balance between self-sufficiency and trade.
Each team is going to kind of pitch up and present in some short form their solution, their story to these sort of village format sites, and everyone will then vote in some form and critique each other's work.
We wanted to collect rainwater from the mountains and draw it all the way to the base.
So this idea of using permaculture to remediate the soils and then to grow crops, and that this would be a long-term process.
The participants can continue to contribute to what they were doing at the lab. And if they're happy with what they're presenting, then we can take it further and filter it.
Through this lab and over the next ones, we will gather material to co-draft a handbook, which will be the basis for how the Clear Village process works.
The ultimate goal would be to begin to establish first one and then ongoing more sustainable villages under the Clear Village Championship in various parts of the world.
Barcelona Lab was an example of what we will be doing with communities to help them produce designs for the ideal future environments. The upcoming labs will involve local experts and renowned design practitioners. The labs are defining moments to give hope to places that are in need of revitalisation. We strongly believe that through these co-creative experiences, we will find the essential innovative solutions for community improvement.
Wow. It's so good to remember that. Okay.
Yeah, good old days. It was a long time ago.
Yeah, and it was fantastic because even the understanding that that such a complex process like a village design must be the result of many complementary views. I was once upon a time I was learning about a concept called bootstrapping. And bootstrapping basically was the idea that the solution to a social problem can only be found in a circle of many diverse people.
Yeah.
And you never know where the decisive answer comes from. The art is to do this facilitation of a circle.
Yeah.
And of course, one could easily argue, okay, there were hardly no locals there, but that was probably planned for the next stages of the project, which I'm sadly to say did not happen until today, and it kind of was stalled in the middle of the way. But we can talk about that in a moment. But still, I admire this groundbreaking event, not only because it was about rural areas, which was at the time the pariah, the unobject. You know, everybody was concerned with cities and urban developments. United Nations have their forecast that in 2050, 75% of people will live in cities, and that is a self-accelerating spiral. So eventually there will be almost nobody in rural areas if it goes according to these projections. And then this is the first courageous act. And the other courageous act is to bring such a large community of people together and to make us understand that our future is not in competition, but in the complementing collaboration, in the design of large networks that can, in collaboration and cooperation, achieve a lot and share their knowledge freely. And I think that also has to do with a structural foresight that we will solve problems locally. So as a global community, we have to become collaborators, because the more we share our solutions, the more we get back from this global community.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it can feel very lonely without that community working on hyperlocal issues. Just to pick up on one thing you mentioned, Franz. I mean, in defense of Clear Village, I don't think our focus on villages necessarily ended with a lab. So I would sort of disagree with that a little bit. We've done a number of projects in villages, and it's actually something we're coming back to much more now, recently, in recent times. It's something which I'm sure you'll agree with. There seem to be more opportunities now to initiate projects in rural locations, which is of course great news. What is fair to say though is that the grand vision that we had at the time of really trying to support this huge network of rural projects around Europe and perhaps even outside of Europe. And that was maybe a little over-ambitious. I mean, of course, it's good to be extremely ambitious with launch events and in order to bring people together, in order to make sure that networks form and people get to know each other and opportunities for collaboration come about. But yeah, I do have to confess that we didn't quite achieve that. But, you know, there's still hope, maybe.
Well, that was by no means meant to be a kind of sort of negative statement. What I felt is that you took too much burden on your shoulders, and nowadays, today, we're seeing an incredible change also in research and development policy, for example, the European Union. For example, this new European Bauhaus, it opens up things that I only knew in America, to open up a creative community before you do anything else. Let people exchange their ideas, and that's something that is only in very recent years has been possible. It has not been possible at the time. And you set an example, and maybe that was a morphogenetic field. I wanted just to add some details for our viewers. The three locations that Thomas talked about were remote mountain village in Cyprus, and the second location was a typical, should I say urban, or should I say industrial, or should I say military, brownfield in northern Italy. And recently I came across the East German Werkstatt Industrielles Gartenreich, which was the refounded Bauhaus in Eastern Germany. And they dealt with the most destroyed landscapes in Eastern Germany. And I read their publication. And in this publication, they say that they had this connection also with northern Italy. So that is a vast part of rural design that's probably neglected. And the third one was actually the urban problem, the problem where rural and urban intersect. And one could say this, in one part of the world, this is the area of affluence, suburbia, and it's creating its particular problems. And other parts of the world, it's the area where the impoverished have to refuge, to be close to the city, and yet far enough to be able to afford even living there. And favelas or Torrebianco in Barcelona, they have something in common. So the incredible thing about the workshop, it was giving us such a perspective of diversity of contexts. And basically, we're not the only three types, but they were chosen carefully to make us understand that rural design is designing for an incredible scope of circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely the thinking behind that was that there never is a standard solution for a design challenge in a village. There never really is an off-the-shelf idea that you can just take and apply without getting to know the context. So it's always going to be important, no matter what, to understand the context. So yeah, for us it was important to have different typologies, different situations, different stories for people to think about in order to appreciate that, okay, everything had to be approached on a case-by-case basis. You know, that said, I think another aim we had was, of course, to acknowledge at the same time that, okay, even though each situation is going to be unique, still there are elements in the methodology or elements in the approach that can be used elsewhere. And actually it's good for all of us who kind of work in the space, or who think about space, or are interested in it, to become aware of some of this best practice, which we can, you know, share and use in our own village projects. So I think whilst everything is different, some of the kind of methodological aspects can be applied across the board. Of course, one thing that was the same for all three locations that we used was the fact that, okay, they were all Mediterranean. So we thought, okay, this is actually a part of Europe that, you know, might need a little bit more care and attention, because we're definitely aware of some issues in the countryside here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, if we do that today, we probably have new issues. We have the refugee issue and things like that.
Yeah.
There were incredible examples of integration in village circumstances. We all know that they have been attacked, but that is something that's probably another story. Mm-hmm. For the continuation of our talks. Yeah. I wanted just to conclude a little bit with what have you learned in the meantime, and how can this be reapplied to rural areas? You told me in our talks before that there is a kind of rural direction that you are taking again.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something we're doing again. There are probably a few different reasons for it. I think one, of course, the fact that nowadays with new technologies, it just feels a lot more doable. It's easier to work in remote locations and to bring in some external skills and to try and help people in different ways. So it feels more manageable. So new technology has helped in that respect. I think we're starting to notice it a little bit in the funding landscape as well. So a lot of the kind of traditional funders that we might look to for project money, whether it's the European Union or national lottery, for example, in the UK, there seem to be more opportunities to try and get hold of a little bit of money in order to experiment with things. So these are some of the aspects that are encouraging us to do more of this, and in some respects to go back to our roots. In terms of what we've learned along the way and what we can do better, I think obviously this is, it's a commonplace. People will always say it, but I mean, I'll say it anyway. It's making sure that one works in collaboration as much as possible. So building relationships, building partnerships, sharing best practice, all of this sort of thing. So basically becoming a part of the kind of landscape of people active in this space, working together, sharing experiences, creating opportunities for each other as well. I think that's point number one. So I think the point you made before, Franz, that in some ways we're trying to do too much, I think it's legitimate. I think it's true. So a better understanding of how different parties could have helped with this grand agenda would have been great, instead of us trying to carry too much of this agenda on our own shoulders. So I think that would really be my kind of primary lesson. So before a kind of massive new push in this direction, really to try and get as many people on board as possible, and just have a kind of huge European or even broader network to try and carry some of this work out.
Wonderful. So let's look what comes out of it. You mentioned human cities and also its direction, which is kind of sort of this opportunity for co-creation arising right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a new project which we're happy to be involved in. Human Cities has been around for a while. It's always been about grassroots action in order to shape our living environment. But the first 3 iterations of the project were very much focused on cities. So now there's the 4th iteration, which is going to be a 4-year project. It's co-funded by Creative Europe. And this one is going to be about small and remote locations. So it's really taking us straight back to the kind of origins of the Clear Village story, which is wonderful. And there's 10 countries involved. Fortunately, we're involved too. So we got the green light from the Commission just before Brexit. That's a topic we won't want to go into right now. But yeah, so there's 10 countries involved, which is great. And yeah, there will undoubtedly be lots of stories and lots of experiences to share and to learn from. So yeah, it's exciting. And as I said, it's only about small and remote locations. So we're very much back in that space again.
Okay, so I close the recording.
Yeah.